Hey guys, it's David from mdbootstrap.com, and in this crash course I'm gonna teach you how to use Bootstrap 5 and what the new features you can find in this newest version of the most popular front-end framework built to design modern, responsive and dynamic web pages and web applications. But before we start, I would like to make a short note here, as Bootstrap 5 is currently in alpha version. So at the time you might be watching this video, there might be already a beta or even a stable version released, which might have some changes in the syntax. So please do check description down below in this video, because if there was an important update, I'm gonna update this tutorial and I'm gonna link the new version to the updated tutorial in the description. However, I don't really expect crucial changes to happen, so I think this tutorial will be still valid also for the stable release. So if you have any sort of interest in web development, you've likely heard of Bootstrap. If you haven't heard of it before, Bootstrap is the most popular HTML, CSS and JavaScript framework for developing responsive mobile-first project on the web. Bootstrap has been around for more than 8 years already, and its most popular CSS framework, as I said. It powers roughly around 18 million websites worldwide, and these numbers are still growing. So if you are or you want to be a web developer, this is definitely something you should get familiar with. So why should you use Bootstrap? So obviously, it increased development speed, so you could write all those classes by yourself. But why would you waste, a few months of your time to create something which is already available for you? And furthermore, it's been tested and verified by other users. As I mentioned, there are like 80 million pages, so a lot of users use that. So it's already been tested and verified, and there is any error, it's already being raised and fixed very quickly because the community is really, really huge. Now, Bootstrap was made to create a mobile first. Its approach is mobile first, which means it's designed to create and assure the responsiveness of your website. Using Bootstrap as other frameworks basically also prevent you from repetition in your code between the projects, so you can just reuse the same elements in different projects, and that's which makes your project more consistent. What is also important is that Bootstrap is being tested against all modern web browsers, so when you are using this Bootstrap components, they are already tested against new web browsers, so you are kind of sure that they're gonna work and those elements are gonna work on each and every web browser. And as I mentioned before, it has a really large community, so in case of any issue, you can just pose the question, or probably the question you are looking for or the problem you are facing has already been posted by someone else, so you will probably find already a solution. And last but not the least, the newest version of Bootstrap 5 is much more customizable than the previous one, which means that you can adjust it easily to your needs. Okay, so what we will cover in this crash course, so what we already discussed, what Bootstrap is. So I'm gonna also give you a small comparison. What are the main differences between Bootstrap 4 and Bootstrap 5? What has changed? And then we're gonna move to the practical part, which will take most of the time in this crash course. So I'm gonna guide you through the installation. So I'm gonna show you how to install and add Bootstrap 5 into your project. And then I'm gonna show you the most popular components, starting with the grid system, which is the most crucial part of the Bootstrap. I think is its biggest feature, which makes it so popular. And then I'm gonna also show you other components, other helpers, other utilities which are available for you in Bootstrap. So this is a list of components available in Bootstrap. This isn't a full list, there are more than that. And we're gonna see how to use most of them. Okay guys, so let's check what has changed in Bootstrap 5. I believe the biggest change is obviously fact that we don't use jQuery, that Bootstrap doesn't require us to use jQuery anymore, and we're gonna talk about it in a second. What else? Bootstrap team has dropped support for an Internet Explorer, and this is awesome because this allowed Bootstrap 5 to use many new cool features as Internet Explorer wasn't supporting many new functionalities which were there in new version of JavaScript or CSS. Next, the use of JavaScript has been minimized in favor of CSS, which obviously makes the entire library much lighter, and there were new CSS custom properties mentioned, which we're gonna cover in a second. Now, next, the other shift to make this library even more lighter was to make almost every option available as a data attribute. So what we can do, we can just change and adjust it using HTML, for example, in components like toast. We can change almost any option just with use of data attribute. Then we have some changes and enhancement in the grid system, which is core of Bootstrap, enhanced modularity, customization, some new components, helpers, utilities, and variation. Some of the components were removed, like Jumbotron. And what I really like also about the Bootstrap 5 is that they work really hard on its own, on their own set of icons, which in my opinion is great. So as far as jQuery is concerned, jQuery brought definitely a lot to web development network, to web development society, and it's been used by millions or billions probably people around the world for last decade and a half. And this change obviously is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, the most crucial one, because the Bootstrap 5 will be significantly lighter on file size and page load moving forward. But what is also very important here is that you can still use Bootstrap 5 components with jQuery. So if you want to do that, you can still initialize them with jQuery. Bootstrap 5 make it possible, which assure you a smooth transition between Bootstrap 4 and Bootstrap 5. Next, as I mentioned, although in Bootstrap 4 there were already some variables, but there were just a few main ones. Thanks to dropping support for Internet Explorer, Bootstrap 5 comes with a set of new properties for almost any element, which makes it much easier to customize it now. So for example, this table component where they added a handful of local variables to make stripped and whole variable and active table style easier, so we can adjust it as we like. The next important changes were made to forms. So with a single set of form controls and the focus on redesigning existing elements versus generating new ones via pseudo elements, they have much more consistent look and feel now. And as I mentioned, the enhanced grid system has a few changes now. So they introduced a new breakpoint, which is double large. A gutter class have been replaced with G utilities, so you can see how easily you can add gutter now to your rows and columns. Form layout options have been replaced, vertical spacing has been added, and columns are no longer positioned relative by default. So to summarize, as far as components are concerned, there are no major changes. However, the implementation of them changed drastically. And as a result, the new Bootstrap is much better organized, and it's modular and easily customizable, which makes it much more easier for developers. So, and also it's much more easier to learn and use for all of us. Okay guys, so let's start coding. We're gonna start with the installation, and obviously there are multiple ways to install Bootstrap. So we can use npm to do so, we can use gulp and other ways, but for today I'm gonna show you a classic way of downloading the CSS and JS asset files. Now I need to make a note here because at this very moment when I'm creating this tutorial, the Bootstrap docs page aren't released yet, and there is no page I could give you a link to download our newest Bootstrap. When you were watching this, probably this will be already there, but as for now, I've just created this page here, so you can find this link in description below. So go to description, open this link, and I have this page for you where I will be linking the latest version of the Bootstrap. Obviously you can also get it from the Bootstrap docs, but if this is not there yet, or it's just easier for you, you can go to description, go there, and here you will find this page. It might look a little bit different, so it might change in the future, but there will be always this download button, and this download button will get you the newest version of Bootstrap. So first, as for today, we have this 5.0 alpha 1, so I'm gonna download it. I'm gonna click download, and it's downloading here. So I'm gonna open this now, go to downloads. Oh, it's still downloading. Okay, so here it is. I'm gonna unzip it. I'm gonna rename it to BS5. So if you go inside, and then again for today there are just CSS and JS folders. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open this project in Visual Studio Code, and I'm gonna create index HTML file manually. So if you have the same, there is no this index, just create it. And now I'm gonna press an exclamation mark and press tab. This will provide me a basic HTML structure of my page. And let's change title to something like Bootstrap 5 Crash Course. Okay, so what we have to do now, obviously we have to link our style sheet. So let's type link and provide link to CSS Bootstrap CSS. Now what we also need to do at the end of our body tag, we have to import JS, and we need two things. So first, dependency, and only as for now, because as you know jQuery isn't dependency anymore, it's a popper. So I'm gonna download this from CDN. So I'm gonna put the link in the description for you, or you can just Google it. So it's the newest version of Popper 2.4.0 as for today, and I'm gonna link our JS. So let's have a look at this script. Source equals to JS Bootstrap JS. Okay, and that will do. Let's put some heading over here. Hello, Bootstrap Word. Let's save it. Let's run it and let's see if this works. Okay, I can already see this typical font for Bootstrap, and yeah, there are no errors, so we are ready to go. Okay guys, so let's now talk about the most crucial component, I think the most important one, which made Bootstrap so famous, which is obviously a Bootstrap grid. So for those of you who already know Bootstrap grid, I'm just gonna cover some differences between Bootstrap 4 and 5, and for those who don't know what it is, I'm also gonna explain exactly what it is and how to use it. So in general, Bootstrap grid is a tool which allows us to create layouts, which you can see on these two pictures, right? So long story make short, this tool allows you to create a different layout for different devices depending on the screen size. So as you can see on the right top corner, we have a layout for desktop where we have like more place, we have some margins, so we can set few boxes next to each other because we have plenty of space to display them, and they will be still perfectly visible. While on the mobile devices where there is not as much space on desktop, then we would rather use the full width of the device. So that's what we can do with use of Bootstrap grid. Now, in a nutshell, how it works, it uses three main components. So it uses containers, rows, and columns. So within containers, we put rows, the violet one, and then inside the rows, we are putting column or columns, multiple. So Now, the next important thing to know about Bootstrap Grid are Bootstrap breakpoints. So these are the places, as you can see. So these are the dimensions of our screen, which kind of split our layout. So we can have as many layouts as breakpoints you can see. So we can have different layout for extra small devices, which are from 0 to 560 pixels, small, medium, large, and extra large. And these are the breakpoints. So this is the screen size. After or below each, the layout will change. And let's have a look at example, because this will hopefully explain everything to you. So let's start with the example number 1. And by the way, don't worry, we're gonna learn in the next part of this tutorial in a couple of seconds how to build this from scratch. For now, I just want you to see how it works. So example number 1, very obvious and very common layout. So for some kind of blog or whatsoever, we have a main column with content and we have a sidebar. And now when we start shrinking this screen size, you can see the screen size here in the top corner. When we start shrinking this, it will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And once we reach one of the breakpoints, which is 764, it will change layout. So now these two columns are one below the other. And this is obviously because, as we've seen here, this is the 768 actually pixels medium screen size, which was defined for this layout to change. Second option shows a little bit more complex one. So we have like header and some articles and footer. And then again, if we make this screen smaller, it will just get nested one below the other. And finally, to explain you how the grids work, let me just tell you that as you already know, grid consists of container, rows, and columns, and each column can have size from 1 to 12. And what does it mean? Actually, you can see it here. So we can have within a row, we can have either one column which is with size of 12, which is 12 width. I don't know what this is, 12 units, some units width. Or it can have any other size from 1 to 12. The whole idea is that in one row, we cannot have more than 12 altogether. So what we can have here, we can have either 12 columns like we see here. So we have 12 multiplied by 1, which gives 12 in result. And then when I'm gonna start shrinking this, you're gonna see a different behavior, and this is because we can apply multiple size to the same div. So this div, depending on the breakpoint, has a different size. So it will have size 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, all 12 columns. And let's see how it works. So I'm gonna start shrinking. So now when I reach next breakpoint, so we've been to extra large, and now we move to extra large. So that was double, and this is just extra large. And in extra large, our column has size of 2, and as a result, we can fit only 6 of columns next to each other, and the remaining 6 will go underneath. So now let's continue shrinking. Now, after next breakpoint, our columns have size 3. So then again, since it's 3, we can fit just 4 elements. 3 times 4 gives 12, and then remaining goes underneath. Let's continue shrinking. Now our size is 4, so then we can just fit 3 columns next to each other, and obviously they are getting wider, right? Relatively wider to our screen. Now when we reach next one, we can just fit 2 columns because size of each column is 6. And finally, when we don't have enough space, we want to our column to take all 12, all width with the size of 12. Okay, so now let's quickly go through changes in grid from Bootstrap 4 to Bootstrap 5. So then again, we already said that there is new extra large size introduced. There is this gutter class which has been replaced with G star, and we're gonna see how to use it just in a few seconds. And there are a few other changes which we're gonna see right now. I prepared 2 classes here, so we can color our calls and containers, so that you could see easily what the size is. Let me maximize this one, or actually let's put it this windows aside so we can see it. So let's start with container. So the basic container is element which allows us to center elements on the page. So as you can see, by default we have margins over here. We can obviously use something which you already know from Bootstrap 4. So container fluid will take the full width available. But what is new here is that we can decide container and the breakpoint, like MD for example. So this will get the full width until the breakpoint. So if I'm gonna shrink this, so now it's taking the full width and for the smaller screens, but once I reach medium breakpoint, then it will change to a normal container. Okay, so this is about the containers. Now let's talk about the rows and columns. So let me also get rid of this style, as we don't need to see it right now. I will leave the coloring for columns. So basically, as I mentioned before, we use rows to aggregate columns, and with we have few options to use grid. So for example, what we can do, we can specify divs. Let's say 3 divs with class call SM, and this will be like number 1, 2, and 3. And let's save it, and we have them here. So if we're not gonna specify this the size of the column, it will automatically try to calculate. So in this case, it will just take size of 4, because we have 3 elements. So 12 divided by 4 will obviously give us 3. Now what we can do, we can mix it. So in the second row, we can, for example, just have 2 of them, and Bootstrap would take care of the calculation. So this works pretty easily. But obviously, more often, what you want to do, you want to define this size on your own. So let's do it right now. Let's do this example which you've seen before. So let's do call MD8. So the MD is gonna be medium size, is gonna be our breakpoint, and it's like main content, maint. And let's create another one for sidebar. So 4. And here we have this sidebar, and now when we shrink it, it will go one below the other. Okay, now, and so we can create very, very, very complex structure. We're gonna probably have another tutorial on this one specifically, but for now, I hope you got the good understanding of how grid works and how powerful it is. Let's just talk about something which has changed in Bootstrap 5, which are gutters. So what we can do here, and let me just use an example from docs. So if you're gonna have a look at this one, we have this gutter x set to 5 here, and this is giving us this space here. Let's see what's gonna change if I'm gonna adjust it to 1. So I hope you can see how this spacing between this element here inside our call is changing when we adjust the gutters. Obviously this one is in X axis, and we can do the same in the second axis, Y axis. So let's have a look at this one. So this is this space between rows, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally 5. Now, once we know how grid works, let's move to the components. Okay guys, so let's start with most common components which you can find in Bootstrap. So I'm gonna start with creating a container for our elements, and let's start with buttons. So I'm gonna start at some heading over here, and then Bootstrap offers you classes for buttons, which are very easy to use. So let's create a new button with the type button, and what we have to do is just to add class btn and btn with extract btn class, which will define the color of our button. So let's do it like this. I'm gonna call it primary, and as you can see, it creates as a nice looking button. There are more colors available, so I'm just gonna copy paste them from Bootstrap docs, and here you can see that these names like primary, secondary, success, they are defining different colors for our buttons. Now we can also add there are another type of buttons available, so I'm gonna just copy paste this one. I'm gonna add outline, and this will create this outlined button. And then again, obviously there are more buttons, outlined buttons available for us. Now, using buttons like everything in Bootstrap, it's also very easy, because when it comes to sizes, we can easily enlarge our button. So let me just copy this one, and simply by adding another class which is called btn-lg for large, we can create a larger button, and obviously doing the same but with sm will create for us a small button. And let's just add a normal button in between. So this is extra large, this is normal, and this is small. So this is XL, this is primary, and this is small. Now another option which we can use is that in case we want to disable our button, we can easily just add disabled property, and this will make our button unclickable. Another common component from Bootstrap is Bootstrap card. So let's see how we can use it. I'm gonna add some line over here, and then I'm gonna add another heading for cards. So let's start with basic example. So the basic card looks like this. So we will have div with class card, and inside it I'm gonna add another div with class card body, and I'm gonna put some content over here. So as you can see, this is how the card looks like, and obviously by default it's gonna take a full width available. So there are two options how to make it smaller. There are more options. I'm gonna show you two. One is not recommended, so this is the first one, and I'm gonna just use it as it's gonna be easier for this tutorial to use it. So we could just apply styles inline, which obviously isn't a good idea. And the other option would be just to use a grid, which you already seen. So if we add a row, for example, and we add call SM6, let's say, I think that should be a good size. And then we just copy paste our card into it. I can get rid of these styles, and this will also make makes our card smaller. Another commonly used card type is a card with image. So how to create card with an image using Bootstrap? We're gonna start with div with class card. I'm gonna copy this style here. What we also gonna do here, we're gonna add some margin. We're gonna talk about margin later, but now already for you to know, I'm gonna add margin. We could add margin from the top only. So I would use MT3, which stands for margin top. 3 defines size of the margin, 3 rems. Or we could use MY, and Y stands for margin, for vertical margin. So for the top and the bottom, we're gonna use 3 rems. So we're gonna start with this class card. Now inside it, I'm gonna add an image, and I have some image here, so I'm gonna add it. But more importantly, I'm gonna add class to it called card image top. And now inside this div, I'm gonna add another div with class card body, which you already seen before. And here we can add, for example, some heading, card title. We're gonna add class to it called card title. And let me fix the typo here. And let's add some paragraph as well with class card text. And let's some data here. So this is how it looks like. So here we have this card, and there is also a variation of this one, which is called a horizontal card. So in order to optimize time, instead of typing, I'm just gonna copy paste it from Bootstrap docs. And this is how card looks like. So I hope you like it, and it's really neat and nice. Finally, I would like to show you the last variation for cards. So let me just quickly go through them. So the first one is a card with a header and footer. So let me copy this from docs. And obviously we need to change the size of it. So this is card with a header and footer. Now these cards can be also easily styled using colors, which you've already seen before. So let me just show you that by applying this background primary, background secondary colors, you are able of adding a color to our cards. And let's also add some margin here, margin Y3, so it looks better. We could also do the same with the border. So let's just quickly have a look at this. So these are the borders, different borders for our cards. And finally, obviously there are more which you can check on a Bootstrap docs page, but I want to show you the most common and most useful use cases. And the last one will be a card group component, which is called card group, which, as you can expect, it's grouping card together. So let me just update an image so it looks neat, and that's how you can easily group your cards in group of 3 or more, so it's up to you. So let's move to the next component. Another important set of features from Bootstrap 5 are text utilities, which allows us to easily manipulate our typography. So let's have a look how they look and work on the example. So let's typography, and let's start with headings. So within Bootstrap 5, obviously all HTML headings are available. So we have like h1, so it's like h1 heading, h2, and let me just copy paste this one to speed it up, and h3, h4, h5, and h6, and let's see how it looks like. So we have all default heading available, but another interesting feature of Bootstrap are HX classes, which are available for us when we want to match a font styling of a heading, but for some reason we cannot use an associated HTML element. So let me just copy paste this one for you to show you how it looks like. So as you can see, these are just paragraphs. These are just paragraphs, but they have a class h1, which makes them looking like exactly the same as a real heading, but in reality they are not headings, they are just paragraphs. And another option which is available within a Bootstrap are display classes. So if we need our heading to be a little bit verbose, a little bit bigger, then we should use this display class, which will make this more this headings a little bit more standing out, larger, slightly more optionated heading style. Okay, now let's have a look at a bunch of other inline text elements, inline classes, which comes natively with Bootstrap. So inline text elements, and let's have a look at elements, and let's have a look at these examples. So what we have here, we have a highlight option, we have del for deleted, s for which represents elements that are no longer relevant or no longer accurate. We have an ins for an addition to the document. Then we have a U, which represents a span of inline text which should be rendered in a way that indicates that it has non-textual annotation. We have a small, strong, and M, which stands for emphasize. So be aware that those tags should be used for semantic purposes. So that's how we use them, and this is how they looks like, right? So we have a highlight, del, s. This is ins, this is u, and this one is small, while this one is strong, and this one is M for emphasize. Another text utility which is available in Bootstrap 5 are black quotes. So let's have a look how they look like, black quotes. So in order to create a black quote, we have to create a semantic tag, add black quote class to it, and then add some text. So let me add some lorem ipsum here, and let's see how it looks like. So this is our black code. We can obviously use a little bit more complex component, so it's gonna consist of a black code and with some thick caption to define a source for this quotation. So this will look like that, right? So we have this one here. Now, using example of black quotes, let's have a closer look at an alignment options in Bootstrap, because what we can use are some specific classes which allows us to control a text alignment. So on this example, we can just add class stating text center, and this will obviously center our text. And if we use text right, it will just align it to the right. So let me perhaps copy this one and paste it as an example of text alignment over here. Now, another option available for us, another classes available for us, which makes our development easier, are related to lists. So what can we do with lists? Sometimes when we want to remove styles from our list, we don't have to do it manually. We can just apply. By manually, I mean adding some styles, some CSS. What we can do, we can simply add a class to it. So let's see first how it looks like. So let's create some another list with some 3 line items into it. Oops. Line items multiplied 3 times, and let's do it like 1, 2, and a 3. So this is obviously how the list looks like now. And if we're gonna add class list unstyled, it will remove all styling. What is important here is that this only applies to the immediate children list items, meaning that we'll have to add this class to all nested items. So if we're gonna have some other list over here, A, B, C, it will already get the styles again, so we would have to add this class here again. Another and more, maybe not more, but also very often used example is situation when we want to put our list in one line. So this is something what we very often do with a navigation, right? So we use list item for our links, for our navigation, and we want to just change the way it looks to be in line next to each other, because we want our navigation bar to be a horizontal line. So let's have a look at this example now. Let me again do it like this. So we have UL with class list inline and LE here, item 1, item 2, item 3. We need to add specific classes to list items as well. So I'm going to add class list inline item to it, and let's have a look now. So now they are positioned next to each other. Another very helpful and commonly used feature are image classes, which makes them responsive. So let's have a look at this example here. I'm going to create a div and I'm going to add some styles to it. So I'm gonna set it width to 40% of our container, and I'm also gonna add some border to it. So let's say border 1 pixel solid red, so we could see how it looks like. Now we don't have any content here, so we can't see a content yet. So let's add an image here. So this is gonna be our image, and as you can see here already, I'm gonna zoom in. This is our image, which is 40% here, only till that place where the red border is visible, and after that our image is going outside our div. So here you can see where our div is ending. So in order to fix it, we can add a bootstrap class called image fluid, which will basically apply a max width 100 and height to auto, which will basically make our image responsive. So as you can see, the bigger our screen is, the bigger a wrapper around the image is, then the bigger also our image gets. And then the same applies obviously to shrinking the size. The smaller the screen is, then the smaller image will become. Now there is also a few extra classes which are available for images. So one is rounded, which will let me remove this border for a second. So this, as you can see, will slightly round our corners, and we can also use classes to float our image. So we can float it to right. So now you can see that we can float it from right to the left without using CSS. We just use this class predefined float right and float left. Another extremely useful feature of Bootstrap 5 are spacing utilities, which makes applying padding or margins very simple. So let's have a look at following example. So we have a div here with width set to 600 pixels, some border around it so we could see it, and some margin set to auto so we could center it on the screen, and 2 paragraphs inside it. So this is how it looks like, nothing fancy. Now Bootstrap makes adding paddings and margins extremely easy. We don't even have to remember the class names. What we have to actually do is just to remember the order or the syntax, which is very simple. So first we start with defining whether we're gonna use margin or padding. So if we're gonna say P, it's gonna apply padding. If we're gonna set M, it's gonna apply and margin. So then after that we have to specify a side like top, bottom, left, right, and so on. So let's say I want to apply a margin on the top side, and then optionally we can define a break point. So for example, like extra large. So this is the break point which will be applicable for this margin. And finally, I'm gonna use a value from 1 to 5. So I'm gonna use 3, and I'm gonna explain to you in a second what does it actually mean. Now let's have a look at this example. So we already have this margin applied here, but if we shrink screen slightly, we're gonna see that it's gone once we reach a breakpoint of extra large. So on the screens smaller than extra large, it's not going to be applicable, right? So the breakpoint which we are defining is a smallest one, which will be effective for this class, for this element. So for everything which is extra large and larger, it's gonna be applicable. Now let's have a look at this value now, because the way I mean, what does this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values actually means. They are defining obviously the size of the margin, so the 1 will be the smallest one and 5 will be the biggest one. So currently this margin is set to 1 rem. So this is a basic unit of in a Bootstrap, a default one. We can obviously override it in SAS files, so we have to update a spacer variable, and basically the values which are used by Bootstrap is like 0 will remove or eliminate all the margins. So remove margin padding. Then 1 by default will set margin or padding to spacer, which is 1 rem, multiplied by 0.25, so 1/4 of it. 2 is gonna be multiplied by 0.5, and 3 is just a spacer, so it's 1 rem. 4, this will be multiplied, spacer multiplied by 1.5, and finally 5, as the biggest one available, is multiplied by 3. So let's comment it out. Let's leave it for future, like this. So now if we want to apply a margin top 3 and margin bottom also 3 to have this margin in the top, from the top and from the bottom, what we can do instead, we can just define an my3, or actually let's do it 5, which will apply a margin from both top and the bottom, so basically from both y sides. So you can think of this as a line like x and y, and if you use x, this will obviously adjust left and right, and if you go for a y, it will adjust top and the bottom. Now let's have a look for paddings. So it's pretty much the same. I'm going to remove the margin for a second so we could better see the results. So I'm going to add a class to this one. So I'm going to say padding 5, and this will apply padding, something which I didn't mention yet. So if we're not going to define a side, so we're going to leave it blank, it will apply to all sides here, right? So now this padding is getting applied to all of the sides here, right? So we have this here, we have this here, and this is how it's working now. And another interesting helper from Bootstrap is an easy way to center elements horizontally. So what we can do is let's create a div inside this this wrapping div. So I'm gonna create a div with class mxAuto, which is obviously setting up and margins to auto. So centered element, and let's add some styles to it. So let's say it's going to be 200 pixels, and let's say we want to have background color to, oh, I have a typo here, that's why it didn't suggest me. Let's say something like that, so we could see it, and this got centrally aligned in the horizontal dimension. Okay, so now let's have a look at tables and how we can work with them using Bootstrap 5. So I've created some basic table here with few rows and columns, which looks like this. And let me rearrange windows so we could see how it works. So Bootstrap 5 makes it extremely easy to change and adjust tables. What we have to do, we just need to add proper classes to either table or a row or cells. So for example, if you would like to change a color of our table, we just need to add a class like table dash and then let's say primary, which will change color of our table to primary, Bootstrap primary color. Obviously we can use these classes which you already know, like primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, and so on and so on. We can also apply this one to a row level. So we can add, for example, table danger, which will change color of the following row. And as I mentioned, we can also add this on the cell level. So if I'm gonna add now table success, this will change to a green one. So I'm gonna get rid of this one to show you a few more interesting options. So what we can do also, we can easily add zebra stripping to any table by simply adding table stripe class, which will color every second row in the table. What we can also do, we can change theme to dark, saying table dark, which will invert our colors in this case. And let me remove this too for a second. So I could also show you the other option, very nice, which is table hover, which will make our rows hoverable and highlight them when we hover over. And obviously we can also mix that with other classes. So Bootstrap will basically take care of that. What we can also do is that we can easily control borders of our table, our cells, simply by adding table bordered to our table class, which will add these borders. And we can also control a color of our borders. So if we're gonna use like border primary, it will give a primary color to our borders. And obviously we can use other Bootstrap colors. If we want to get rid of our borders, even these horizontal ones, we can add class table borderless, which will remove all the borders. Another interesting option is sizing. So for example, we can make our table more compact simply by adding table.-sm, which will decrease paddings on the table. Now Bootstrap also makes it very easy to make our tables responsive. So let's add some new table over here. So table responsive, and I'm gonna add some predefined table here with a more with more columns, so we could see better how it works. So if we add this surrounding div around it stating table responsive, we could easily make it responsive by adding this scroll. So Bootstrap will take care of this one, and it will add scroll, so it could be better visible and usable on any device, regardless of size of the screen. What we can also do, we can also define a breaking point for this one. So decide when this scroll will be added. So similarly, like in other cases, when we are using these breakpoints, like with margins or paddings from what we've seen before. Another very interesting and very useful components are alerts and toast, and don't get confused by these names, because they are kind of misleading. So let's have a look what we are talking about. So as I mentioned, Bootstrap offers you two different components. The first is alert, so it's like simple div, but when we add this alert class to it, and obviously we can define a different colors, like usually with Bootstrap components, so primary, secondary, success, and so on, we can get result as follows. So as you can see, this is usually used to show some important message, some kind of bar on top of the page, just to make sure that people won't miss it. But other than that, there are also toasts available in Bootstrap 5, and they also sometimes are called alerts, and let me show you why is that. So let's add alert here. So let's call it toast. Sorry, I mean let's add some toast over here. So this is a toast syntax, which I'm gonna paste it right here. So we have some div, we have some toast header here, some image placeholder, and then some body of the toast. And what is interesting is that we're not gonna see it here, so it's not showing up here. We have to invoke it using JavaScript. So let's go bottom to the below the JavaScript section. So after loading Bootstrap.js, and let's see how we can invoke it. So what we're gonna do first, I'm gonna get list of all elements which have this toast class. We could obviously get it by ID, but usually what you want to do is that you want to prepare more toast like this, and then just fire them in a proper order. Or you may also want to just use one of them and then dynamically update the status, but I'm gonna show you this Bootstrap docs way of firing them. So I'm gonna create an array. So let's let toast element list. So we're gonna create a list of our elements. We're gonna slice query selector all, and we're gonna get all elements with class toast. Okay, and now for each element in the list, what we're gonna do, we're gonna use map to create a function toast element, and then what we're gonna do, we're gonna return new bootstrap toast, and we're gonna provide this parameter as a value. What we could do here, we could optionally provide an options object, and then we could define our options like this, and then have some options like for example animation or other options. But as I mentioned before, so like this, and then pass these options to our object. But as I said before, in Bootstrap 5 they put a lot of attention to make everything available as attributes, HTML attributes. So we can either pass this animation through for JS, or we can provide another option here, which is like data animation. So we could say like data animation equals true, and this will work exactly the same. So then again, as I said, we can do it either like this or like that. And yeah, this is very cool about new Bootstrap, that they really put a lot of effort to minimize JS usage as much as possible. Okay, and then now finally, once we have that, let's fire our toast. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get this toast list. I'm gonna get this first and only element. I'm gonna use show option. Obviously we could get this one by ID and then do the same. I mean, initialize it here like that, and then use it. But as I mentioned, we might want to use it we might want to use multiple toasts. So let's have a look how it looks like now. So I'm gonna refresh the page, and you should see this alert here. So as you can see, it's popping up. First of all, it's disappearing automatically. It's so-called auto hide option. So what we can do, we can turn it off. So now, as you can see, it disappears, and until we close it, it remains open. And obviously, usually what you want to do is that you want to put it somewhere in a corner. So we're gonna add some custom styles here. So let's say position fixed, and then top 10 pixel from the top and 10 pixel from the right side. And let's save it, refresh, and now our alert is being shown in the top right corner. Obviously, we could use any placement on the page, but as you can see, this is a very cool component which allows us to show some warnings, errors when user makes some mistakes or whatsoever. Now let's move to the next component, which is a Bootstrap carousel, or sometimes called slider. So this is how this component looks like. So it creates few slides for us, which are automatically sliding, automatically changing. As you can see, I didn't do anything here, and we can also control it. So this is a very cool component which is often used in some themes, WordPress themes, and some blogs or whatsoever, when we want to have this highlighted element. And let's have a look at the structure here. So then again, it's not anyhow difficult. So what we have here, we have just inner div for carousel, where we specify as many slides as we wish. So we can just, add more slides over here. And then we have this optional part where we can specify the control for slides. So we can have this arrows to the left, to the right, if we obviously want, because we also can just remove them and then we won't see them. Like here, they are gone. And the slides are just automatically moving. So it's up to you whether you want to use them. And obviously, as usually in Bootstrap, we can also programmatically move our slides to left, to right, next, previous using JavaScript. Okay guys, next very interesting component, which is also known from Bootstrap 4, it's a scroll spy. And this is how it looks like. So we use scroll spy to show user current status, current element which she is reading at the moment. So as you can see, this is a kind of menu for us, for the user. It's kind of agenda, and while he reads, while he moves down, it shows him where the current status is. Obviously, we can click to go to given element, so where we want to. This one is multi-level, so as you can see, we have this item 1 and sub items here. So yeah, this is very, very cool, which you often see in different documents or on different technologies. For example, Google Docs uses that. And then again, it's a little bit more complex, but still fairly easy. I created a new file for that one, and this is because we have to add we have to add this two attributes, so data spy and data target, to element which we want to spy on, and usually that will be a body, but this is not always the case. And since we had other examples in the previous one, so I just created a brand new file just for a scroll spy to show you this example. So basically this obviously is something which has to match with this ID, and yeah, I mean this is a very useful element, and we are using this all over time when it comes to our docs for AMD Bootstrap. Another killer feature of Bootstrap are navs and navbars, which are meant to help us build a navigation tool. So let's start with navbars first. As you can see, navbars are usually these bars which you can see on top of the page, sometimes on the bottom. And Bootstrap then again makes it very, very easy to use, as it has its predefined component which are like ready to use. So what we can do here is that we can put as many links as we want. We can put drop downs here, which are another Bootstrap components, some search panel. And what is amazing is how easily customizable it is. So if we change this class container to container, container fluid to container, we'll get our navbar tightened to the center, so it's like more into center, so it doesn't take the whole space in it. Now, if we would like to change, this text over here, to replace it with a logo, we just need to change this one and add image with proper classes, and we will get a logo over here. What's also really cool is that we can easily change color of this navbar, like we used to do with other elements. So for example, now it says navbar light, background light, but what we could do is we could just change it to, for example, navbar dark and background dark, or actually any other bootstrap color, and boom, it will automatically change and adjust all other styles to make it look neat and clean. So these are navbars, but as I mentioned, Bootstrap also offers us elements called navs, which are a good baseline for basically any navigation we could possibly think of. So we can use it to build our own version of navigation or some sub-navigation. So I'm gonna put this inside the container, and it's pretty simple. What we have to do, we just have to create an unordered list element with class nav, and inside that put elements with class nav item. Let's say we want to have 3 of them, and inside that we're gonna put again links with some classes nav link. So a nav link, nav dash link, we're gonna do it like that, and we're gonna say it's link 1, and we can also easily mark given item as active. So as you can see, we have our links over here, and all of this active class didn't do anything here, but this gonna be very useful in another component available for us, which is called tabs. So let me paste a markup from Bootstrap docs, and let's see how it looks like. So it's pretty much the same, but now we extended this functionality with option to dynamically change the content under different tabs, right? So now this class active shows us which one is actually active, and obviously for that one we could also add some custom class to show which one is currently browsed by user. And this one is that one is also available in a vertical option like this. Let me add some margins here so we could see it better. Okay, so this is the vertical one. So as you can see, it's a really cool tool, really cool component to create, for example, some settings page where we can have different settings set without need of coding this by ourselves. Now, when we talk about nav bars and navigation, very often we want to use not only images but also some icons. So what is really cool about Bootstrap 5 is that they really put a lot of effort and attention into developing their own icon set. So before that we usually had to use some other sets like Font Awesome, but with Bootstrap 5 it seems like they really polish it out, and there are already around, I think, 670 icons available. So for example, what we can do with our navbar here, we can add an extra icon over here, which will be a drop down at the same time. So we talked about drop down a little bit before, so let's just add another drop down here. So I'm gonna get this one, this drop down. I'm gonna just copy paste it here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get this drop down from here, and instead of the word I will just put an icon over here, and let's change this one to, let's say, projects and settings and log out. And what we can also do is we can add another icon here before it, and now we can have this cool drop down menu in our navbar. So there are as I mentioned, there are more than 600 icons available, and I really feel that they're really cool. I mean, here you can see them, they're quite small. They're all SVG, as you see, so they are scalable. So what we can do, we can change size of them to, let's say, 5 rem, and now we got them much larger. We can obviously color them since these are SVG. So yeah, I think this is a really good step forward from Bootstrap 4, that they put a lot of attention into developing this set of icons. And finally, the last set of components which we're going to cover in this crash course is going to be forms. So Bootstrap 5 offers us a nice option, nice way to keep our forms in the clean, neat style. So what we have here, we have classes for inputs, for radio checkboxes, and also some helpers like file handling, input, and some others like wrench picker. It also comes with some predefined validation. So if you look at this form here, we can easily add validation to it, just a piece of JavaScript. So let's have a look how this looks from the code perspective. So I'm not gonna go through all of them because as you can see, there's a lot of code, and it's been already almost 1.5 hours for this course. So I just want to keep it short. But as you can see, you can easily achieve this result by applying this form label, form control, form text to our inputs, controls, and labels. So that's what you basically do, and Bootstrap will provide this this nice style, this nice look to it. What is important to mention is this, for this intermediate checkbox. So that one, which is like not checked, not it's like tentative or something like that. You have to do it via JavaScript. So you have to add this pseudo class to this element using JavaScript. It's not available via HTML, which is a kind of pity, but perhaps it will be changed in the future, or maybe there are some technical limitation which doesn't allow them to do it. And as for validation, which we mentioned, this is a very simple implementation for validation. So as you can see, basically for each element in form, it's verifying whether it was validated. And as you can see, this uses this HTML required option here, and we can use this invalid feedback for each element separately. So we can define different errors here. So yeah, I think it's really cool and very useful, especially for the new projects. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you like this video, and now you know what new you can see, what you can expect in the Bootstrap 5. And if you haven't heard of Bootstrap before, that now you know what it is and how to use. So if you like this video, please leave a like below this video and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notification because we are doing a lot of tutorials like that in different technologies. And what is even more important, if you would like to get notified about new releases of Bootstrap, you can leave your mail here on the page from which we downloaded a Bootstrap. So if you want to get notification about next alpha or beta releases or stable one, just leave your mail here and I'm gonna send you notification when new Bootstrap will be released. And obviously if there was gonna be some new tutorials, if something is gonna change, some syntax or whatsoever, then we're gonna just let you know so you won't miss it, because yeah, Bootstrap is currently the biggest framework used in the web development, so it's definitely worth to know what's going on. Thanks again guys for watching, and see you in the next video.